The banquet hall was full of laughter. Crystal glasses clinked. Expensive plates moved across white tablecloths, and people in formal suits spoke loudly about deals, politics, and influence. It was the annual leadership banquet, hosted by one of the largest corporate foundations in the state. Your one click can keep these stories alive. Subscribe, because every voice deserves to be heard. Don't miss out on the journey. Subscribe and let's grow, laugh, and learn together. Everyone important was there. CEOs, investors, local politicians, and apparently me. I hadn't planned on coming, but my older brother Daniel insisted. You need to start networking, he told me earlier that week. This is where people who actually run things meet. Daniel worked for a major consulting firm and loved events like this. Expensive dinners, powerful conversations, and the chance to show off his connections. Compared to him, I looked simple. While everyone else wore designer gowns or tailored suits, I wore a plain dark dress and a small watch I'd owned for years. When we walked into the ballroom, Daniel immediately spotted several colleagues and left me standing near our table. Try not to disappear, he joked. I rolled my eyes. But the real problem wasn't Daniel. It was my parents. They were already seated when I arrived. My mother looked at me up and down and sighed quietly. That's what you're wearing? She asked. It's a banquet, not a fashion show, I replied. My father shook his head slightly. You could at least look like you belong here. I sat down calmly. For years, they had made similar comments. To them, success meant visible wealth, expensive clothes, luxury cars, big titles. My life didn't look like that. So in their eyes, it wasn't impressive. Dinner began, and people at our table started introducing themselves. One woman ran a tech company. Another man owned several hotels. When it came to me, my brother smirked slightly. This is my sister, he said. She works in government. Someone raised an eyebrow. What department? I took a sip of water. Federal. That was all I said. My brother laughed lightly. She never explains more than that. The table chuckled politely. My mother leaned closer to one of the guests and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. She's always been the quiet one. My father added another comment. Government salaries don't exactly compete with the private sector. Several people nodded sympathetically. One man joked, at least the benefits are good. More laughter. I didn't react. I had learned a long time ago that explaining my job rarely helped. Most people assumed it was just another mid-level federal position. Paperwork, meetings, policies, nothing exciting. Halfway through the banquet, the host stepped onto the stage to thank the guests. People clapped politely while dessert was served. Then something strange happened. At first, it was just a faint sound outside. A distant rumble. Guests near the windows turned their heads. The sound grew louder. A few seconds later, someone near the back of the room stood up. Is that a helicopter? More people looked toward the large glass windows overlooking the hotel lawn. And there it was, a dark military helicopter descending slowly onto the grass outside the banquet hall. The entire room went quiet. Conversations stopped. Forks paused in midair. My brother frowned. What the hell? The helicopter landed firmly, its blades still spinning. Two uniformed security agents stepped out and quickly walked toward the building. My father laughed nervously. Well, that's dramatic. People near the entrance stepped aside as the doors opened. The agents walked into the banquet hall, scanning the room carefully. Then one of them spoke clearly. We're looking for Dr. Elena Carter. My brother turned toward me slowly because that was my name. For a moment, no one at our table moved. My brother looked at me like he was waiting for a punchline. You know them? He whispered. The two agents were already walking between the tables, scanning the name cards. The entire banquet hall had gone quiet. Then one of them spotted me. He stopped immediately. There she is. The second agent followed his gaze and nodded. Both of them approached our table. Guests nearby leaned sideways in their chairs, trying to see what was happening. My mother looked confused. "Are you sure you have the right person?" she asked the agents. The taller one spoke calmly. "Dr. Elena Carter?" I stood up. "Yes." The agent gave a short, respectful nod. "Ma'am, we've been instructed to bring you back to Washington immediately." The room erupted into whispers. My brother blinked. "Washington, D.C." The agent continued speaking professionally. "There's been a situation at the Department of Defense Advisory Board. Your presence has been requested for an emergency briefing." My father stared at me. "You work with the Defense Department." I picked up my small clutch from the table. "Sometimes." My brother looked completely lost now. "Sometimes." One of the guests leaned forward. "Wait, you're a defense advisor?" The second agent clarified. "Dr. Carter is the senior strategic analyst assigned to the Federal Cyber Defense Program." A few people at nearby tables gasped quietly. Someone whispered, "That's a top-level clearance position." My mother's face went pale. My father looked like he had forgotten how to speak. The agent gestured politely toward the door. "The helicopter is ready when you are, ma'am." I nodded once. Then I turned to my family. My brother was still staring at me. "You never told us any of this," he said. I shrugged slightly. "You never really asked." My father finally spoke. "But why the helicopter?" The agent answered before I could. "Because when Washington calls Dr. Carter," he glanced toward the window where the helicopter blades were still spinning. "We don't waste time." The room stayed silent as I walked past the tables. Dozens of eyes followed me. People who had laughed earlier were now whispering in disbelief. At the door, the agent held it open while the wind from the helicopter pushed against the glass walls of the hall. Behind me, I heard my father stand up. "Elena, wait." I turned slightly. For the first time that night, he didn't look critical. He looked stunned. "You're really that important?" he asked quietly. I gave a small smile. "I'm just doing my job." Then I stepped outside. Moments later, the helicopter lifted off the lawn and rose into the night sky. Back inside the banquet hall, the same people who had mocked the quiet government employee were now realizing they had been sitting next to someone Washington trusted with the country's most critical decisions. The helicopter lifted smoothly into the night, the city lights shrinking beneath us as we headed toward Washington. Inside, the cabin was loud but calm. One of the agents handed me a secure tablet containing the briefing documents. "Cyber breach attempt," he explained over the headset. "Multiple federal systems targeted at once." I nodded as I scanned the report. This was exactly the kind of crisis my team handled. 40 minutes later, we landed on a secured helipad outside a federal building. Officials were already waiting. But back at the banquet hall, the story didn't end. After the helicopter disappeared into the sky, the guests slowly returned to their seats, still whispering. My brother sat frozen for a moment. Then one of the executives at the table looked at him and said quietly, "Your sister is one of the people protecting national infrastructure." Another guest added, "That's not just a government job. That's one of the most trusted roles in the country." My mother stared at the empty chair where I had been sitting. My father looked down at his glass, unusually quiet. For years, they had measured success by titles, money, and appearances. But that night, they realized something different. The quiet daughter they had underestimated was the one Washington called when the country needed her most.